Hi, everybody. This is Howard Schweitzer again, and I'm responding to Steve Grumbine's attacks on the Green Party and myself, mainly because there are a lot of lies, and I don't understand why he's doing it. But, you know, politics is a passionate thing that people get carried away with, and I'd like to address some of what he had to say. I think the main thing that I'd like to talk about, we talk about MMT and the Green Party's greening of the dollar. I think we agree on the fact that we want government, we want Congress to spend a lot of money to fix the big mess that we have in this country and the world. And so, you know, spending on healthcare and education, fixing the infrastructure, and addressing climate change and the sixth grade extinction that's underway right now in a meaningful way. It's going to require changing the system. It's going to change the way we do things. And one of those basic things is the money. Now, he claims that government creates the money. Well, government creates a little bit of the money, a little teeny tiny bit of the money, but the banks create most all of the money, and it's pretty, you know, reasonable to say the bank create all the money, because the only money that the government really creates is the coins, and you know, how much coinage do we really spend around? So it's really nothing. And so we agree that we need to spend lots of money, but it's how do we get that money? Now he criticizes the Green Party for saying, well, we want the government to be the main issuer of money instead of the banks. We want to take their authority away that government gave them back in 1913, gave the banks the authority to issue our money, and then we borrow it from them at interest. What a deal. You know, if you're powerful enough to buy congressmen, you can get those kinds of deals, right? Most of us can't get those kinds of deals. So, so anyway, we agree that we want to spend a lot of money. How do we get Congress to do that? Well, right now, when Congress spends, Treasury either spends the revenue that they've collected via taxes or whatever, or they borrow it, or they sell securities, right? They don't borrow, they sell securities. But what is a security or a T-bill or a bond? And it's a piece of paper that they print, and they sell it to the banks. Most of the banks are the ones that buy most of it. And they buy those bonds with money that the banks just create ex nihilo, out of nothing, right? They create that money, the banks do, to buy those bonds. That's what happened in 2008, for instance. You look it up in the TARP legislation. It was, the funding was authorized to sell securities. The Treasury was authorized to sell securities to buy the assets, the troubled assets that the banks had. Well, they sold that security. The banks created that money, and we got that money. Then we bought their bad debts, gave that money back to them. And we got the bad debts. And of course, we got an increased debt and increased interest payments to pay every year, which the government does. Now, MMT goes through a bunch of convoluted things to say that we are not paying interest on it, but the fact is that's the second largest budget item, you know, after military, is paying for the debt in our discretionary budget. So that's where we are. Now, the Green New Deal criticizes the Green Party for criticizing the Democrats for stealing the Green New Deal. Well, not really. I mean, you know, as Oscar Wilde said, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery that mediocrity can pay to greatness. so, you know, that they're picking up the Green New Deal. That's great. Trouble is the version that they have of the Green New Deal leaves something out. And in the Green Party's Green New Deal, which I can show you here if you like to see it, is where is that? It's somewhere up. Oh, I guess I don't have it up, but it is on. Okay, no, that's not going to work. Okay. I meant to have that up so that I could just share that and show you what I mean. But I've got to kind of minimize some other things here in order to get to it. Here it is. Okay. Now we'll go back here and we'll share screen now. And so here's the Green New Deal that we've been promoting since, well, strongly since 2012, but really before that, because the Green New Deal has been around a while. And, you know, it's about a lot of rights and a lot of spending that we want to do. But down here in Section 3, under Real Financial Reform, which we want, we have this little section here. Democratize monetary policy to bring about public control of the money supply and credit creation. This means we'll nationalize the private bank-dominated Federal Reserve and place them under a monetary authority within the Treasury Department. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, you're putting it under this monetary authority, unelected. Wait a minute. It's a transparent system that's going to be under public authority and accountable. Whereas the system right now is private, unaccountable, secretive. I mean, Congress doesn't even get the minutes of the Fed's meetings, you know, because it's a bunch of private bankers. And so that's where we are. So we have to fix that. And so if MMT says the government already does it, and what we're saying is we want to guarantee that the government does it, you know, by fixing the law to make sure that they're the ones doing it, not banks, that we're not borrowing that money. So why are they attacking us for us wanting to guarantee that government issues the money? Well, they're making this argument that, oh, it's going to be a big waste of time because it takes a big mass movement to make that change. Well, it takes a big mass movement to get Congress to spend the money right, doesn't it? So why not have them guarantee that they have the authority to spend that money debt-free? And that's the difference between government spending and banks, because banks issue credit. They don't issue money. They issue credit, right, that we use for money. But when government issues money, that's money. It's a public asset. It's not a debt. So that can be spent directly into the economy. Most of the money that the banks have been creating has been going into the speculative economy, or what we call the bubble economy. And that's where they're speculating on existing assets and stuff and making money off of existing assets instead of putting that money into the real economy. Whereas government spending would put money into the real economy. And that's where we live, right? We all live in the real economy. That's where we need the money. Not in speculation making people rich, because there's, ridiculous distribution of wealth right now that's so extreme. It's not funny. But I want to address a couple other things. So that was the Green New Deal. However we get the Green New Deal, that would be good. But, when FDR came up with the first New Deal, it was on borrowed money. Government didn't create the money to do it. That's what the 200 economists who were appalled at what happened actually in the Depression, because what happened was the banks just stopped lending. Well, that crashed the economy. They did it on purpose so that they could pick up farms and businesses and homes for pennies on the dollar, which they did, to the tunes of billions of dollars worth of assets. And that's what happened in 2008. It was a big transfer of wealth from the public to the banks, to that top 1%, really, is who got most of it. And he mentioned something about this one, which I found very confusing, talking about positive money. And he said the NEAT Act was a version of positive money. Where did he say that? Here somewhere. Anyway, this is kind of bizarre. A bastardized version of positive money. Well, Ben Dyson came to AMI for a couple of years in a row to study what was going on there, the explaining how the money system worked. And then he got very excited about it. And he's a very smart guy. And he actually helped Stephen Zarlinga with writing the NEAT Act a little bit, as I understand it. But what Ben did was go back to England and start positive money after learning about monetary reform from Stephen Zarlinga. And I don't know why Steve Grumbine thinks that's so terrible, that Stephen Zarlinga did 11 years of research on the money system and dug deep in it and wrote this incredible history book that Michael Hudson says, is necessary to understand the structural foundations of the system. I mean, you really need to read this and understand what monetary science is, because it's not taught in any of the schools. All these professors that come out of universities, they haven't studied money. It's not studied in the schools because the funders of those universities are the banks, right? So anyway, he says the GP doesn't want to advance the Green New Deal. Of course we do. That's what we talk about it a lot. We need a mass mobilization. Yes, we do. And that mass mobilization our central demand should be change the money system so that we can fund things properly. Now, he's very angry right now, and it's like, dude, take a chill pill. I mean, I don't care how bad it is, you got to keep your spirit up. And let's see some of the other stuff that he was saying. Keeps saying that we're liars, but I'm not sure what the lies that we're telling is, because we do research into what we're saying and want to make sure it's right. It goes after old timers. Yep, I'm old. Sorry about that. But in most cultures, old people are respected and considered wiser just because they've seen a lot more of life and had a lot more experience in life. And so they learn from that. And the old people would tell the stories to the younger people so that they could learn too. And, when I was 10 years old, I saw the House Un-American Activities hearings on television when I was a kid. And black and white television back then we were watching. My dad was a television repair guy, an electronics guy, and had learned it in the Navy. And so when he came out of the Navy, he was into that. And so we had a TV by 1955. And so we watched those hearings. And But, you know, we've been watching this political system for a long time, and that's what it is. A lot of older Greens, they've been watching this political system for a long time. Some of them have written books, and we've got people that were former Republicans, former Libertarians, former Democrats, former Independents, who've all come to the Green Party because they understand the problem that we got to fix the economy, and we've got to fix the ecology. And they go together, because the economy is like the house rules. Eco is house, right? And nomi is rules. So economy, that's the house rules. And the ecology is the study of the house. Well, we've studied the house, it's in trouble, and we need to change the rules and to fix it. So that's what we're actually about. So what else can I say? If I wish there was somebody here who could ask questions so that we could further explain what it is you don't understand about the money system. I do have some slides I could show to talk about it a little bit. And in fact, let me do that. And I'll see if I can share screen again here. Come back and share screen. Now we'll get into a little bit more detail. And there's my whole screen. Let's see. Let's talk about the money. And well, actually, we could just go through this whole thing because it's pretty good. I mean, pretty interesting stuff. What monetary reform means to Greens? Well, it means paying for what we need to do to fix the economy and the ecology, and so we can live on a living planet, because right now it's under threat, you know, and we all know that. And it means that we want a new American Revolution. We want, because the original American Revolution was about money too. It was about the Bank of England controlling our money, and we wanted to out from under that. We wanted to issue our own money. Hamilton talked us into going with a private bank, and in 3 years we were in debt to the Bank of England again. I mean, really. But we don't want an ordinary revolution, because, you know, revolution is just spinning around and ending up in the same place. We want a solution, right? We want a real solution. And we would like to create a coalition of care, you know, between everybody who cares about the planet, cares about the economy, cares about others, you know, cares about the communities that are starving, cares about the communities that are in war. We can fix all of that. Those are just human things. So what is the economy? It's basically an exchange of goods and services, and we use money to do that with, to make it efficient. But where these big green arrows are, you know, this is the ecology. This is where it all comes from. All wealth comes from our planet and the sun that drives it. No getting around that. So who creates the money? Well, the government can create money, and the banks can create money because they've been authorized to. Of course, they've been creating money for a long time anyway, because they've been involved in it for a very long time. There's a lot of great history. If you, in this book again, you know, a lot of great history there. So the coins, well, the government creates the coins. It mints them for about 11 cents a piece for a quarter, and sells those 4 quarters for $1, and they get 56 cents profit on that for every $1 that they sell. That's called seigniorage. You'll find that in the Treasury's report every year, how much that was, how much we paid for the coins, how much we got for them. And then there's the federal bills. Now, the the Federal Bureau of Engraving and Printing, they print the bills. They print the Federal Reserve notes. They too cost, well, I think they're actually cost less than 11 cents. But say it costs just 11 cents now. It doesn't matter if it's $1 or $100 bill. That's what it costs to print those things. But we don't sell those at face value to the banks. We sell them at cost of production. And so as they issue that cash money for cashing checks, whatever, that's when they get the seigniorage. So they get the profit on all of the paper money. And of course, most of the cash money is not coin, it's paper money. And so they're getting most of the seigniorage on that. In England and other countries that have a public central bank, when the government prints the bills, which is still just 3% of the money supply, they do get the seigniorage on theirs. So, the Bank of England gets like $18 million profit on the money that they issue every year for their government services and stuff. But they don't control monetary policy because the banks control monetary policy because they are so big and issue the most of the money. And if you control the quantity of money, you're controlling the economy. That's pretty simple to understand, right? And so 97% of the money in circulation is account money. And it was created when they either issue a loan or they buy securities from the government. And so that's where most of the money in circulation is. That's where most of the money, period, is. It's in accounts too, investment accounts and all that kind of stuff. And speculation, that's where most of it is. In the crash, here we go, in 2008, when that big crash happened and we were forced to bail out the banks, because the banks were threatening if we didn't bail them out, that they would shut the whole system down. And so Congress passed legislation, and here it is. Secretary may use the proceeds of the sale of any securities for the funding of bailing those banks out. That's what happened there. So it increased our debt. Well, let's look at debt. Here. Now this is just a 2006 graph, so it's not up to date. Sorry about that. But you can see that government debt is down here. And this is household debt, and this is corporate debt. And you see that household debt and corporate debt are on an exponential rise. Government debt's not quite on an exponential rise. It's not going up as fast as these guys, right? But it's still sizable chunk, but not that big a deal compared to the amount of debt that there is. It's only about a quarter of the amount of debt that there is. And of course, there's way more debt than there is money to pay it off in the world. That's the way it is. And that debt keeps getting bigger and bigger because of compound interest and all of that that's going on. So these are the areas of debt that really are causing the problem in the economy, not so much government debt. Because if government could issue the money, there wouldn't be a debt. It would they would pay that off as it came due, and then there wouldn't be any more because they wouldn't be having to borrow money. So that could be gone. And by issuing more money into the real economy so that people and corporations aren't having to borrow money, you see, that's the thing. Corporations are in debt to the banks too. The people are in debt to the banks, but so are the big corporations because they're just, wealth extractors for the banks. And so they extract the wealth, the oil or whatever it is, destroying local economies, taking over farms, growing all the food. And we end up with them under control. And of course, with debt, you know, why do we go to work every day? To pay our debt. We shouldn't have to do that. And under the NEAT Act, there's a provision in there to create a citizen's dividend based on the amount of equity that the country has every year, and distribute that to everybody. And it would be a significant amount, you know, $10,000 or more for people to spend as they see fit. So now they don't have to go to work for some job that they don't like. Why would we, you know, and this idea of government giving you a job, why would you want the government to give you a job if you had an option to do what you wanted? Maybe you had always wanted to pursue some other thing, but you couldn't afford to do it. For instance, farming. I have a guy down the street that has to work another job to pay for his farming habit. He loves farming, but he can't make enough money farming, so he has to work another job. Well, there's lots of people that way who would love to do farming, growing food, getting their hands in the dirt, you know, creating life, really, is what that is, you know, creating more fertility in the soil, which is what will help balance the atmospheric cycles that we have out of whack right now. So we've created all these emissions to go up in the air with, at the same time, destroying the Earth's capacity to deal with those emissions. And what regenerative farming would do is create the fertility in the soil, which is life in the soil, that would start pulling that back out of the air and into the soil where it belongs, because it's food for the critters in the soil. But when we pour poisons on our soil and kill all those critters that like to eat carbon out of the air, what happens? We get out of balance. We start getting global warming, crazy climate change. But I want to go look at this. This is the global wealth distribution. Here's our wealthy at the top, and here's most of the population down here. Now, some of the population doesn't have anything, but 80% of the population is way down here, and there's this tiny bit of the population that has this huge amount of wealth. Now, most of that is from speculation. It's not even going in the real economy, and that's why there's not much wealth down here. And another thing to point out is that 80% down here, that's where all the art and innovation comes from. It doesn't come from the rich people up here. They haven't got any ideas except I want more money. I want to figure out some way to cheat somebody to get more money. That whole world is Wetiko, as Native Americans would call it, depending on what tribe you were in. They all had a name for it, but Wetiko was the, I think the, was it the Algonquin? I'm not sure. One of the tribes, but, or Ojibwe, I think it was. And what that means, that's a self-consuming greed, you know, so greedy that, you know, everything else doesn't matter except more for me. And of course, that's what economics courses do. There was a study not too long ago that the longer students stayed into economics program, the more selfish and self-centered they got. And that's, you know, the economic man that they study in there. And so that's why they end up, you know, that because the economics profession, that's the banker's profession. Most of them work for banks, and some work for universities. So we got this way out of whack distribution of wealth, and we want to fix it. Because here's what an ideal distribution of wealth, according to 92% of Americans, would be. And you still have some wealthy and you still have some poor, but everybody's doing a lot better than that other graph, aren't they? You see, and we've taken the speculation away, And now it's just how hard and smart you work, and distributing money in a democratic way so that everybody can produce what they want to do or take care of their loved ones if they want to do that. All of these things people should be able to do their own creativity and knowledge and spirit, whatever their spirit calls them to do, they should be able to do that. But we have this situation. The Princeton University did a study, and if you aren't familiar with that, check out the Princeton University study. You can just call it that because, it's a specific study, and they've done a lot of studies, but you Google that one and you get this study. And what they did was they took 200 of the most politically active companies, corporations in America, and looked at their lobbying expenses, bribing government with, it's not just lobbying, but it's also for campaign contributions and all the kind of stuff that keeps the ball rolling here. And so look at these. You got they broke it down into 6 industries: the pharmaceutical, energy, defense, communications, agribusiness, and finance. And they spent $4 trillion this is over 10 years, I believe. And they spent $4 trillion over 10 years. Now, that's a lot of money. But no, wait a minute. No, they spent They spent $5.8 billion. They got $4 trillion worth of benefits from that. Yeah. So you can see $5.8 billion they spent in bribes, and they got $4 trillion back. So that was a pretty good investment. But like I said, all of these other industries are in debt to this one industry down here in the lower left corner, the finance industry. So you got your pharmaceutical, energy, defense, all these corporations, they owe money to the finance industry. And who was the biggest contributor? The finance industry, of course, keeping government in line. And so there's 3 reforms that the Green Party, the Need Act, the Chicago Plan, back FDR could have changed it back then, but didn't. Well, he come from a banker family, right? Sorry. But what we want to do, you make the Fed part of the government. In other words, we don't want a private central bank. We want a public central bank. And in fact, we don't even really want a central bank at all, but they have some, things that they do. And so that should be in the Treasury. And then bank creation of money as debt would be stopped. Instead, the government would issue money. And the banks would only loan money that already exists, money that they have. A lot of people believe that now. They believe that they also believe the Fed is a government, right? That was intentional. That's why they called it the Fed, was to fool Americans. But so the bank creation of money as debt is decisively stopped. And the banks lend money that's held in time deposits. People put money in the bank, and then the banks could lend that out to people for stuff that they need. Well, they're not going to need as much in a public money system like we advocate. But when they do, they can go to the bank for this. Now, if the bank says there's a lot of people asking for loans that we don't have deposits for in a public money system, the government could say, oh, well, we'll lend you the money so that you can have more credit. Instead, you pay us a little bit of interest instead of you, making all the money, interest money off of loans. And so we could help them out if it was necessary. And then the third part is that the federal government creates and spends into existence U.S. money in non-inflationary and deflationary amounts for the needs of the nation. Again, it's what people think is happening now, and it's not. And the reason we have to do all 3 of those reforms all at once is for good reasons. Because the Bank of England was nationalized in 1946. I mentioned that earlier. They have a public central bank. But because the money creation power was not stopped, private banks still create 97% of the UK's money. Same way in the US, same way pretty much world around. The whole world is in this system because it's a global financial system and it's all one monetary system. I mean, you can call the currencies a pound or a dollar or whatever. You can call the currencies whatever, in whatever country it is. It doesn't matter whether it's socialist or capitalist. The banks still control the money. And so we definitely need Reform 1, right? And then Jackson and Van Buren revoked the second bank in the U.S. So they stopped bank creating money. But because they didn't understand that the government needed to be issuing money for the economy, they created a massive depression. It was just like the bank stopped lending, you know. But this time it was the government that stopped the banks from lending. And he was thinking that gold would be and silver coinage out there would be enough to keep the economy going, but it brought on a massive depression, the worst one the country had ever seen. And then the country had already been through quite a few bad depressions, some caused by the British before the revolution. And then the last one, debt-free greenbacks need to be created, as Lincoln did and issued, because if you don't stop the banks creating money, they have so much money, they can still mess with your government. And they eventually quashed the greenbacks. So our reforms are not just to ensure that the government creates the money, but to provide protections so that the government can continue to create the money and spend it on public purpose so that the banks don't go and take it back over. There was a banker back in the 1920s that said that, you know, that the banks own the world, and if we took the power to create deposits away from them, that money would all get distributed to the rest of the world instead of into the pockets of the few. But if we didn't take that away from them, we just took all their wealth away from them, with a stroke of a pen, they could buy it all back. So that's why we need to change that. And here's a little bit about cost of, you know, a private money system versus a public money system. Cost is a penalty in a private money system. It's money out of your pocket because it's a debt and a loan that has to be paid back. So, you know, and when a loan is paid back, the principal is destroyed. So that money, you know, we have money scarcity, and that money gets destroyed instead of recirculated. In a public money system, when that money's paid back, that money gets recirculated because it's a permanent money system. Anyway, that's probably enough of that for now. So, yeah, we should have more of a conversation. I would like, somebody suggested a debate, and I think that'd be good. It would be good to talk about these specific things. But I think the main thing is that we agree that government needs to spend a lot of money, and we need a mass movement to make the government do that. Now, whether the government creates the money now or doesn't matter. We need the government to do it. And Congress is the one that can change the law to do it. MMT says they don't need to change the law. Well, that doesn't make any difference to the mass movement. The mass movement says, Congress, you do it. And of course, what we need to do is elect ethical people to Congress to do that. People that won't take the bribes, that won't take all of those campaign contributions and stuff, and won't make all those promises to their donors and skew public policy toward the banks instead of towards public purpose. And because we've got a situation that's getting worse and worse. There's people saying we've got 12 years to reverse this climate situation. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is to get people back on the land. You know, the centralizers, the centralized system that we have now, where the global banking system creates the money, it centralizes because it invests in cities, is where its big investments are, and that draws people to the cities, and they leave the local economies, they leave the rural lands, and they come into the cities. And all around the world you see cities that happening to, and in the developing countries you see, you know, it's surrounded by slums. Every city is surrounded by huge slums because the people have been driven off of the land because of crushing poverty. Well, we need to put that money back out on the land, get the people back on the land so that they can start growing fertility in their soil and growing food, decentralize the production system, because right now, if the trucks stop rolling, the grocery store shelves would be empty in 3 days, you know. So we need to decentralize food production, get it back into your neighborhood where you live. And that's where you should be working too, is in your neighborhood, at your local area. Why do all this commuting? Why do all this shipping? You know, we need to get our production back into a reasonable scale so that so we produce stuff for ourselves instead of shipping it all over the world and commuting all over the world, chasing the buck, chasing the dollar. It doesn't make any sense, and it creates a lot of the emissions. And of course, the centralized chemical farming destroys the Earth's ability to deal with it, and cutting down forests too. You know, forests provide a tremendous service to the atmosphere and to the ecology, processing pollutants. And our houseplants, they process pollutants. That's why they're here. Plus, we like having them around. Plants are nice. Plants are loving. Anyway, I think love, rather than the hate and anger and stuff, is going to get us a lot farther. And let's figure it out together. Thank you. Take care. Oh, how do we end this thing? Okay. Bye.